Disney's golden age of animation has given us some of the most iconic animated movies of all time. And in this episode, I've ranked all 5 movies in order of my personal preference based on the quality of their storytelling, characters, and timelessness. So let's get started. Fantasia was an experimental film that took the silly symphony formula of combining music with animation and presented it in a full-length feature format. The film pushed the envelope in many ways, including its storytelling, by opting to go with a lecture demonstration method instead of using a traditional narrative-based story arc. But that method also created some glaring lulls in the pacing that can make it hard for the average viewer to sit through. Fantasia's first half is the weakest, with only the iconic Sorcerer's Apprentice as a standout vignette, in addition to the memorable fight between the Stegosaurus and T-Rex during the Rite of Spring segment that lasted forever. The most memorable moments of Fantasia are the characters from his second half, with the Greek mythos of the Pastoral Symphony, the dancing animals from the Dance of the Hours, and A Night on Bald Mountain's Chernobog, which is by far the scariest villain Disney has ever made. Fantasia made an admirable attempt at making orchestral music palatable for a mainstream audience, but even though the film was avant-garde for its time, the lack of a narrative-driven story makes Fantasia difficult to sit through, and overall it hasn't aged as well as the other films in this lineup. Dumbo was created at a time when Disney needed to make a hit movie on the cheap, which is why it's their shortest animated feature and embraces a cartoony aesthetic, so the characters would be easier to animate. But where the story lacks in length and character detail, it more than makes up in its emotional power. Dumbo is a tragic figure, with big ears, an imprisoned parent, he's bullied by others, and rejected by his own kind. The story has very little comic relief, and in the middle of it all, we get the baby mine scene, which is one of the saddest moments in Disney history. But then there's that weird pink elephant scene, which is so strange. It was an innovative choice for Disney to incorporate surrealist art and animation, but the sequence does feel like a tangent to the main story just so Disney could take the opportunity to flex its creative muscles. The crows are a controversial aspect of the film that may offend modern audiences, but Dumbo's themes of overcoming prejudice are still just as applicable today as they were back then. As opposed to Fantasia, Dumbo has a fast-paced narrative, loaded with emotional gut punches, but the story's lack of emotional depth, by mainly dwelling on the melancholy, makes it inferior to others on this list. Bambi is Disney's first animated film that focuses solely on animals, and it was one of the most impressive depictions of the natural world that still holds up today. And the story has several memorable side characters, such as Thumper, Flower, and also the great owl who gave us the word
Twitter-pated.
The story spans a wide range of emotions, with humor, as well as intense moments of fear from the unseen hunters in the forest. And who could forget Bambi's unforgettable loss of innocence when his mom dies? Bambi's songs aren't as memorable as other films of the era because they're mostly non-diegetic, meaning they aren't sung or heard by anyone on screen, so their emotional impact is subliminal to the rest of the visuals. The animation is top-notch, but the story's narrative flow isn't as fluid as other films, since we just observe 4 brief moments of Bambi's life during each of the 4 seasons, and the young prince has no other objective than to just grow up, survive, and find a mate. The story has emotional range and the high-quality visuals Disney is known for, but Bambi's jump-cut-style narrative about the circle of life doesn't resonate as strongly with audiences as other films, since we humans have more complex issues to deal with besides pure survival. Pinocchio is Disney's second full-length animated feature, and was a huge technical improvement upon its predecessor, with more emotive characters and innovative techniques, with the fairy's twinkling wand and dress, and the amazing water effects that are still some of the best the hand-drawn industry has ever produced. The significance of the song When You Wish Upon a Star can't be understated, since it went on to become the theme song for the entire Disney Corporation, and Jiminy Cricket, who sang it, became a staple character for many of Disney's future projects. Pinocchio's themes of being brave, truthful, and unselfish, and listening to our conscience are just as relevant today as they were back then. And the story has some great lighthearted moments, as well as scenes of intense drama, like Lampwick's frightening transformation into a donkey. However, the plot suffers from the fairy serving as a deus ex machina to conveniently solve Pinocchio's problems to help the story move forward. The plot also suffers from too many antagonists, with Honest John and Gideon, Stromboli, the Coachman, and Monstro. So as a result, we see Pinocchio spend more time being taken advantage of instead of developing the characteristics needed to become a real boy. While Pinocchio does demonstrate bravery and unselfishness by saving Geppetto from Monstro, he was never able to prove he was truthful, making the fairy's 3 requirements for boyhood feel more like guidelines, which in turn diminished the impact of the movie's resolution. Snow White and the Seven Dwarves is the most significant film of the Golden Era, because if it didn't succeed, then Walt's whole company may very well have come to an end. But in the end, I had to give Snow White the top prize, because of the quality of its story and characters in comparison to the other 4 films. The movie has the strongest opening hook, by kicking things off immediately with dramatic tension, by showing the Queen's jealousy of Snow White's beauty. It needs to be said that Snow White's relationship with the prince is by far the weakest part of the whole picture, since all he has to do is show up and sing to win her undying affection. Well, perhaps undying isn't the best word to use, but you get what I mean. The dwarves carry most of the story thanks to their comic relief and relatable personalities. The Queen is a nasty villain, and her transformation and surprise visit to the cottage are still some of the most intense scenes Disney has ever made. Even though Snow White's love-at-first-sight relationship gets eye rolls from today's audiences, it's easy to see how the film that was first considered to be Disney's folly turned out to be his greatest success of the Golden Era. Click a video on the screen for more rankings and facts about other Disney movies, and sometimes Deus Ex Machina fairies, right here on Fun Fact Films.